right. Well, is that the last bit of news we have?
That's all I got.
Then let's move over to A Quiet Place Part 2 review. Tyler and I mentioned that we watched this. Luke also has watched it. He submitted kind of his little review to me, so I can read it off. If I pull it up. Oh, that's my scent. That's my scent box. Luke says, A Quiet Place 2, this is his Twitter review, is an excellent sequel that does a great job of picking up right where the first one left off, not only in story, but in the heart and tension. They made the world bigger without sacrificing the characters and story, a problem a lot of sequels fall into.
It's a very well written out thought. I love it.
Yeah.
My impressionable tweet description, a great addition to an already great story. Part 2 doubles down on the scares, action, and emotion as we venture into this apocalyptic world.
Nice.
Definitely think that world is growing, for sure.
Mm-hmm. My tweet is A Quiet Place Part 2 is a fantastic sequel. It builds on the world and characters in all the right ways while treating us to a healthy dose of action and suspense and silence that the first film captured so well. Minor nitpicks aside, I think it's nearly perfect.
Wow. Using that perfect word is kind of crazy.
Perfect is a yes. And obviously we talk about any kind of art is subjective. And so while I may use the word perfect, I understand that not everyone, and I said nearly. I didn't say exactly. I have nitpicks, like I said. But man, it's so good. It's so good.
I agree. I loved it.
Run some pros and cons?
Yeah, I think that, the one pro that anytime you see a movie that's good like this, the first pro is always going to be the cast.
Yes.
I think the cast is just fantastic. They all do such a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Even the characters, which I'm sure is one of your nitpicks, who doesn't have much to do, is just amazing at what they are doing. I think my other two pros are we get a little bit more backstory on what started this whole thing. And we get more visibility to the monsters and kind of seeing what they look like in action. In the first one, I don't think they had the budget to do that kind of thing. So
well, the first one was so old school inspired by like the idea of what you don't see is scarier than what you do see.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is obviously budget limitations.
Yeah.
And the fact that they got an increased budget and were able to still show us these things that we have already seen, but they still get to be scary while we see them was a highlight.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. And then my last pro, and it's not because there's not a lot of them, it's because I want to keep things moving and let you guys cover yours.
Mm-hmm.
This is ultimately a Regan and Emmett story, and I just think it works really well. It allows us to move from the characters from the first one to the characters of the second movie and tell their story a little bit. And I just really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, part one was such a John Krasinski and Lee and what's the mom's name?
Is it
not Emma? Emily.
I want to say it's like Evelyn.
Evelyn? That sounds right. Anyways, it's the parents' story, and the kids are kind of caught there. And this one, Evelyn does such a great job at kind of pivoting to the kid. It's the kid's story now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really well written. I would agree with you on the kind of expansion of not just the monster characters, but the world that they're living in.
Yeah.
Like you kind of said, there's John Krasinski is in this movie. I don't think it's a spoiler.
It's in the trailer.
It's how the movie starts, which is like a 10 or 15 minute flash. Maybe not 10 minute flashback, probably.
Yeah, and how many cuts are in that? Like once things started, because there's a lot of long
takes.
Yeah, a lot of long shots.
A lot of long takes, which
pretty cool.
I appreciate. But so it grows the first movie was so focused around the farm.
Mm-hmm.
This one, from the beginning, you're seeing the town, which you see a little bit of in the first one, but it's
Yeah.
like it's self-referential in that way, in a really, really good way. It's like I'll remember these places.
Remember this Easter? Like, there's little Easter eggs from the
Yeah.
first movie.
But then even going beyond that to like from how do we protect our home to how do we protect our home on a bigger scale, right? How do we
Yeah.
use this knowledge that we've learned in the first movie to really keep going? Luke says for his pros, acting. I would agree. You had mentioned it.
Yeah, Cillian Murphy is a great addition to this world. By the way, I don't know if we've explicitly said his name.
Yeah.
He's Emmett.
Yes.
He's awesome, and it's a different kind of character for him. But he did a very, very good job, and I look forward to hopefully seeing more of him in other projects as well.
Yep. Yeah, Luke says Cillian Murphy fit in really well. Also, shout out to my girl, Emily Blunt. Of course, Luke would shout out to Emily Blunt.
Good man. Loyal. I love it.
He says the tension in the movie
Yeah.
keeps you on the edge of your seat. I think it's a little more of a... It does a good job in transitioning from like a drama tension to more classical horror tension, because they have to up the stakes. The stakes are that there are more creatures and they are more around. And so how do you do that? Well, you introduce some jump scares and you introduce the fact that they could be around any corner because this is a completely new area we're exploring. Yeah. We're not in the safety of our own home.
Yep.
Sound design with a title like A Quiet Place and not making a sound. You gotta have to nail this on the head. And they did twice. That's what we said.
Yes.
And I would agree. I think they... there's some action scenes that they do really well with the sound design and music, and then they transition that really good with especially Reagan's character.
Yeah.
To like the deafness and like
when she loses her cochlear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But even in those in between moments, we're still living in a world where no one wants to make a sound.
Yeah.
So it's eerily quiet, and it ratchets the tension up.
And I bet it's super quiet on set when they make these movies.
Luke also thought it was pretty emotional. I would agree to a certain extent. I think they did a good job playing with emotions, and there's some spoiler stuff I won't go into, but it certainly didn't have the same impact on me as the first one did. But yeah. Especially with Reagan and her quest.
Yeah.
And what she's trying to be and overcome. Good cinematography, score, and the opening scene, which would be the flashback, are all pros on Luke. Luke wrote a ton of pros, which I agree with all of them.
Yeah, they're great. That opening scene is nuts. It is one of the most intense scenes in a horror movie I've ever seen, I think. Just like how quickly it all starts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 1 minute, you're kind of you're in this feel good state. You're like, oh man, this is really cool. Like life before the world fell apart.
Yep.
And then it's just a complete nightmare within 5 minutes, and you're like, oh boy. No, it's a great movie. But with any great movie, there's also some cons.
Yep.
I'll quickly hit on mine. I think Marcus, which is Noah Jupe's character, is ultimately kind of just there. I think of the arcs for each character, his is probably the weakest. And just that I don't really feel like he has a lot to do. Sure, he goes on this adventure of, I don't want to say self-discovery, but kind of overcoming the fear of being alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, and he kind of goes through some stuff, but for the most part, he's kind of just there. The other thing that this is a major nitpick is we kind of get in the trailers, and in the movie as well, they talk about how the people out there aren't worth saving. And we really only get one instance of that being a thing, which is kind of what I was really interested in.
Yeah.
However, on the flip side of that, if this was a Godzilla movie, I'd be like, don't give me the human villain, right? So like, I understand that there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, but I definitely think The Quiet Place world lends itself to a little bit more of that than Godzilla does.
Oh, for sure.
Just in that, and we get it for a scene, and it's really good scene. But I kind of wanted more of that, like.
Yeah.
Hey, don't go there because this faction is here, or
Right.
or like this group of people is here, but there's always room for more storytelling. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are my two nitpicks, if you will. I don't really call them cons, but
Yeah, I think mine are definitely nitpicks and not cons.
yeah,
My first one is that I feel like I wanted the Cillian Murphy character to be a little less like slightly scruffier John Krasinski. Like, that's where I wanted more diversity in the cast.
he started there. He started where you wanted him to be.
Oh, in terms of his yeah.
His disposition on the whole matter.
Yeah. But even just like I felt like they were just replacing one kind of I mean, John Krasinski just had that charisma that Cillian Murphy's character didn't until there's things that happen that change his character, obviously. But I think I would have just preferred, and again, in a nitpicky way, because I think he played the part really well.
Yes.
I just would have preferred maybe giving that role to someone who it wasn't just like, here's another bearded white guy. There's probably my biggest nitpick. My other nitpick is that Digimon Hansu was in the movie for 2 minutes, and he could have had a lot more.
Rumor has it he had to get to another movie to film because he's in everything.
He is in everything. That is true.
That's a total joke.
No, but it is true. Luke's con was Digimon Hansu dying in the trailer, so that was unfortunate for the Mar. Oh, I don't think
he died in the trailer.
He did. I didn't even realize he died in the trailer. I wasn't paying enough attention, but yeah, so not really a surprise then.
He was good for like the 6 minutes he's in the movie.
Yeah.
Spoilers, I guess.
Very talented actor. Could have used him more.
Yeah, I think there were some really cool creative decisions made with the monsters in this episode. It almost feels like an episode in this movie. I really look forward to whatever they do next with this property.
Yeah, I think it ends with that promise of if we have another idea, because Krasinski's even been like, I wasn't planning on making another one, but I had this idea, and from there it wasn't a hey, this one did well, let's make a second one. It was a hey, I've got this idea for a second one, and then they're like, okay, well the first one did well, let's make a second one.
Yeah. Yeah, he pretty much is going to get the green light anytime he approaches Universal.
Oh, for sure.
It's Universal, right?
Oh yeah, Universal is under Paramount.
Yeah,
so.
Like I think if he just approaches him and he's like, "Hey, got an idea," they're like, "Cool, let's do it." Like they don't even like think about it.
Yeah. This one leaves the world open for more stories and more exploration of things. Like they do a good job of giving you little bits of things. It's interesting because we talked about last week how Snyder kind of did the same thing in Army of the Dead, but he didn't do it well. And I think they do it well in this movie. In terms of there are things like the coming or the emergence of, I'm trying not to spoil anything, the emergence of the monsters, how the monsters arrive, open a bunch of questions about them that aren't really important to this story because it's not what this story is about. But as you move further and further away from the farm, you could encounter part of how they got here, and that could lead to some really interesting story points.
Yeah. No. Yes. Yes.
But
All I'll add.
Luke's rating is a fanboy worthy. A Quiet Place franchise is a fantastic series for people wanting to be introduced to the horror/thriller genre.
Yeah, it's pretty digestible horror movies.
Yeah, they're a nice. They're not crazy. They're not like. They don't go over the top like a lot of horror movies try to now, with the shock and awe of things. Like either that be gore or jump scares or just terrifying imagery. It builds that tension. It rewards that tension with a satisfying release of some kind, whether that's like a scare or a whole action type of thing. Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm gonna give it a booyah.
Ooh.
I'm gonna back up my nearly perfect comment with a nearly perfect score. I absolutely agree. I think it's very digestible. It's one of the first movies I'll point people towards if they're asking about a modern thriller or even just a good thriller, because I don't think it leans too much into the horror aspect. It does a little. It's more of a horror film than The Invisible Man was. And we had that whole discussion last year, right?
We did.
But I think it's a good, and I wouldn't even say starting place. Like, it's just a great movie to be in that genre.
I'm gonna give it a fanboy worthy.
Okay.
I don't. I can't give it a booyah just because I think there are some things I'd like to see more of them. But no, it is a very strong fanboy worthy. 2 years from now, I could change that and say booyah, but for now, I'll stick with fanboy worthy.
Fair enough.